Good morning, everyone. What we have for you now are two presentations demonstrating peatland conservation, restoration and management here in Northern Ireland. We go to the beautiful South Downs, County Down, where we have the National Trust, Melina Quinn and Patrick Lynch. Patrick Lynch, joined by Mark here this morning, is a conservation ranger for Murdoch and Mourne since 2006. He has progressed from being a volunteer, and he continues to work closely with volunteers, supporting their development in the necessary skills for applied conservation. His work includes developing and implementing management plans and leading on surveying and monitoring work. Melina joined National Trust in 2018 and is now their nature conservation advisor. She works across Northern Ireland to provide guidance and support to properties on nature conservation management, and she works with teams to identify the opportunities to increase the value of National Trust land for nature, carbon and people. She works very closely in partnership with volunteers, government and non-governmental organisations. National Trust.
2020 marks the 125th birthday of the National Trust, and earlier this year we reaffirmed our ambition to play our part in meeting the needs of an environment under pressure and the challenges and expectations of a fast-moving world. Never has this been more critical. There is no doubt that the global pandemic has brought us closer to nature, as the likes of Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough draw public attention to nature in crisis. We have seen communities exploring the special places we look after and becoming more connected to their local natural environment as they do so. The nature and climate crises are having a devastating effect on the environment around us, and people are noticing it. It feels like we are waking up, opening our eyes to the delicate balance between our lives and the natural world. The tide is turning in a direction that is powerful, urgent and compelling. It is easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of change needed, but let's not be daunted. Let's strive to make the necessary change at sufficient scale and pace. This will be a real challenge, and one we all must face into as individuals, communities and as organisations. As we come out of the chaos brought about by the global pandemic, the National Trust is focused more than ever on nature's recovery for the benefits this will bring to people. Included within the mix are nature-based solutions we can use to meet our target to be carbon neutral by 2030. The National Trust is the proud custodian of 18,000 hectares of peatland across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. From the forgotten fenlands at Wicken to the windswept moors of central Snowdonia, we have been active in restoring peatlands for all the riches they offer. Understanding we are better when working together, we are partners to some of the most active peatland restoration projects across the UK, whilst our outreach and advocacy work enables us to share the benefits peatlands offer and ensure their protection. Our efforts to support nature's recovery is tightly bound to Sir John Lawton's recommendations to government on making space for nature. Our strategy for nature is to make our land better and bigger, as well as more joined up, and this aligns well with the UK peatland strategy to protect, enhance and sustainably manage peatlands. We work closely with the UK IUCN, Peat Partnership and others to demonstrate the public benefit peatlands provide. The management of our land, which covers 250,000 hectares, will be critical to delivering our objectives for nature, climate and people. Our efforts to restore our damaged peatlands will be central to them all. In Northern Ireland, we look after approximately 200 hectares of peatland habitat across 7 sites. We look after blanket bog and a mosaic of habitats at Divis and Black Mountain in the Belfast Hills, and a lowland raised bog at the Argyre Mosses, once part of the peatland complex south of Lough Neagh. We look after an important area of land designated for nature conservation within the Mourne Mountains, and we would like to tell you more about our work on Slieve Donard. Donard stands proud at 852 metres, the tallest mountain in the Mournes, so it's a tough climb and can be just as challenging to manage. Donard can be viewed as a microcosm of the challenges we face in delivering for nature, climate and people.
The National Trust's interest in the Mourne Mountains came into fruition in 1991 when it bought a 500 hectare site on the northeastern side of this area of outstanding natural beauty, including tourists alike, who come to marvel at the sea and the landscapes. The Kingdom of Mourne is widely promoted as a tourist destination and brings significant revenue to the region. Part of the Eastern Mourne's area of special scientific interest and special area of conservation, the land under our management has a unique combination of upland habitats and associated vegetation communities. We look after an extensive area of dry heath, along with wet heath and montane heath, on the summit of Donard and Comida. Flushes, fens and swamps are also found on the mid-slopes of Donard. This complex matrix of habitat support important plant, fungi and invertebrate assemblages. Its diverse flora includes alpine mosses, bog cotton grasses, pale butterwort and a number of heathers and dwarf shrubs. There is a significant upland bird community, including the red grouse and skylark. Common lizard, Irish hare and grayling butterfly add to the diverse fauna. Despite these treasures, Slieve, Donard and the wider Mournes suffer from a number of threats and pressures such as overgrazing, significant visitor pressure, atmospheric nitrogen and climate change. Our work to restore these priority habitats have included reducing the grazing pressure, a challenge in an unenclosed landscape where we are just one of the many graziers. We no longer graze the area during the winter months. We are currently tackling the scrub and bracken encroachment by hand and through grazing prescriptions. Our efforts for more sustainable land management are starting to pay dividends as a flower-rich heath matrix starts to recover. While it may be too early to see the full ecological response, we have been making inroads on the other major cause of decline: erosion pressure from visitors that unwittingly trample and erode the habitat.
We would like to share the partnership work that has been carried out on Donard.
Hundreds of thousands of visitors are attracted annually to the main access route up Slieve Donard. Large sections of the path have become severely eroded. This erosion is induced by human pressure and then exacerbated by climate factors, mainly rainfall. The fundamental aim of the work we are doing is to repair the erosion damage and improve the visitor containment along the path in order to protect the upland habitats. Restoration of the footpath is carried out using upland pathwork techniques that will have a minimal impact on the character of the landscape. Natural on-site materials are used, including stones, turf and spoil. An effective method of revegetation and natural landscaping is turfing and infilling the erosion scars, gullies and path edges. These techniques have been successfully applied over the last 30 years to provide high-quality paths across Britain and Ireland in response to recreational and climate pressure.
Like most things in life, it's the people that are key and really matter. National Trust are currently very focused on delivering our strategy for nature, climate and people, and to maximise our contribution to nature's recovery. The success of the Donard Path project is that it has been delivered by a partnership of which we are just one part. The key partners are the Mourne Heritage Trust, Mountaineering Ireland, Newry, Mourne and Down District Council, Northern Ireland Environment Agency as a key funder through the Challenge Fund, and the Forestry Service. We are creating opportunities for local communities to get involved, from better access through to citizen science, such as a national plant monitoring scheme. We are supporting greater access to this national gem for all, and our ambition is to develop outreach programs in the neighbouring communities. We are restoring lost skills of upland path building within the community. We are incorporating volunteering through local businesses, raising awareness of the vital work we do to protect these fragile habitats. To date, we have recorded over 2,000 volunteer hours and worked with over 100 volunteers.
Working in partnership with Donard means we are increasing our knowledge and expertise on land management, the how-to of restoring habitats and the kind of targeted interventions needed to recover our threatened habitats and species for future generations. Organisations such as ours are good at forging partnerships between non-governmental organisations along with the voluntary and private sectors, and we are seeing real change start to happen. Mapping out our respective contributions to a shared ambition under the UK peatland strategy will ensure we all play our part in peatland conservation, restoration and management.
Thanks very much, Melina, Patrick and Mark on that fantastic immersive experience in the Mournes. We now go to Ulster Wildlife and Trish Fox. Trish is a previous journalist, previously in another life, and however has had a strong background in applied conservation for the past 20 years. And since 2014 has worked with the Ulster Wildlife and its raised bog restoration team. Trish.
Good morning everyone, and thank you for that. And welcome to a presentation about the lovely Turmennan transition mire in Northern Ireland. So just to start off with a little background, my name is Trish Fox and I work for Ulster Wildlife. We're one of 11 project partners involved in this very large collaborative action for the Natura Network project. Newry, Mourne and Down District Council are our lead partner, and we work with all partners across Northern Ireland, the border counties of the Republic of Ireland and Western Scotland. And we're in the 4th year of a 5-year project. So most of our project sites are bogs. So the list here shows you the raised bogs and the big blanket bog that sits across the border in Fermanagh and Cavan. And we also have other project partners who deal with cross-border sites, but these are the ones that we particularly work on. We also work on some alkaline fens in County Down, 4 lovely fens. One here shows the Mournes in the background. And of course, the subject of today's talk, which is Turmennan, which is a transition mire. So Where is Turmennan? Well, for those of you tuning in from abroad, maybe, this is Northern Ireland. So we have Belfast, which is about here, and Turmennan sits here between two villages and towns called Crossgar and Downpatrick. Unfortunately, because of you know what, we can't take you out on site with us, and we'd love to show you this beautiful site. But we are lucky enough to have some aerial footage from Paul Corbett, who threw a drone up over Turmennan a few years ago very happily, and we can now have a look at that and see this wonderful site from the air.
Okay, so here we are at the southwest corner of Turmennan, and you can see the very different land use around the site. So we have some deciduous woodland here on the left, and we have ash and oak plantation. And these are just privately owned plantations. The ash is very badly affected by dieback, unfortunately. And on the right there, you can see some just rough grazing ground. And as you move up the fen, you start to see these very big, deep, open pools of water. Turmennan has very deep water in it, and is quite a dangerous site to navigate. But animals do, and you'll start to see now, just as we come up, some tracks through that reed bed. There are red deer in this site. There are also conic ponies, but certainly it's a tricky site to move through. Well, while we were preparing this talk, we contacted research fellow Dr. Frances Kane from Queen's University, who's working on a lovely project called Place Names Northern Ireland, and we asked her for what she thought Turmennan might mean. And Tyr or Tur comes from, many of you be familiar with Land of the Eternal Young, Tyr na Og. Tyr means land, and Mennan, she said, could have two possible meanings. It could either mean land of kid goats or land of rocky outcrops. And coincidentally, one of the owners did say to me that when he first moved in, and there were goats on the site. However, for anybody who knows and farms this area of County Down, there are a lot of rocky outcrops in the area. And indeed, one of the other owners said that who's owned land in the area for many years, they actually know it as the rocks. So it was lovely to provide a bit of kind of ground truthing for that Place Names Northern Ireland project to go back in. And you'll see as you come up here, you'll see some of those rocks on the left. And they were, of course, put to good use by the people years ago, and there are about 6 dwellings throughout the area that's now owned as the reserve, and it's quite humbling to stand in those little tiny houses with their little fireplaces and imagine living there. So as we're flying up over here now over the major part of the Phragmites reed bed, you can see some tracks through that. And that's made by machinery, which you'll see later in the talk. Very important to manage those Phragmites reed beds. And they are very, very aggressive, but very helpful plant in a wetland, but important to kind of knock them back ever so often. And of course, traditionally, they would have been used for thatching many years ago, but not so much now. So as we move up, you'll see the machine has left a big wide track there, and you'll see some lovely gorse over to the left. I think we're very unappreciative of this lovely plant. It provides nectar almost all year round for some of our invertebrates, which is very good. And as we move up here, you start to see a little purple patch at the top of the site, and that's the true bog. So we have true bog on the site in the north and in the southeast. And it will never become a true, the whole site will never turn back to bog because of reasons I'll go into later in the talk, but it's nice to have a little bit patch of it there.
So one of the interesting features about Turmennan is its ownership. Now, years ago, Down District Council was looking for land to use as a dump, and it applied for planning permission to use this particular area as a dump. Unfortunately, the locals knew that it was very special and campaigned very hard for it to be saved. And I'm pleased to say that Ulster Wildlife, which was then the Ulster Trust for Nature Conservation, also objected to the planning application. and surveys were done. The true value of the site was recognised, and it was designated an ASSI, and the government then stepped in and bought a lot of the land. So this shows you here, this is the area in green that the Northern Ireland Environment Agency own and manage, and the area in red is the boundary of the ASSI, or Special Area of Conservation. All of the sites we work on in CANN are special areas of conservation. So if we drill down into that ownership a bit, you'll see again I mentioned NIEA, and we also have 5 private landholders shown here in different colours. So there's a real sense of a need for shared responsibility in management of this site, not only from the people who own land on it, but from neighbours who don't own any land on it. And I'm pleased to say that 2 years ago we had the public and private land managers sitting together for the first time in the room together, and that will be a very important thing going forward, that they are talking to each other and cooperating. So for Turmennan, we're going to produce a conservation action plan, and that'll hopefully move the site towards favourable conservation status. All of the sites in the project are in unfavourable condition, and you can see here this is a habitat map that's been produced for the CAP by one of our CAN partners, AFBI, and you can see, if you can imagine, as you were following that video, we moved up here through fen, into swamp, through fen again, and up into bog. So, favourable condition, what does that mean? Well, NIEA go out every 6 years and do condition assessment monitoring, and the reasons basically that Turmennan is unfavourable is because there's too much scrub on it. Get too much scrub, it then dries the site out, and you start to lose open water, you start to lose habitat for the many species of invertebrate for which this site is also listed as an SSI. Such as dragonflies and diving beetles. NIEA are working very hard to deal with this particular threat on their land, so they have people out cutting the scrub. They also have enlisted some on-site managers, which are the beautiful conic ponies, lovely rare breed from Eastern Europe, and very commonly used in wetland management, and able to get across land that you and I would not dare walk across, and very, very light-footed. And so they've been doing a good job. The other thing, of course, is machinery, and I mentioned that reed bed was managed. So here's the truckster machine in there taking those reeds out. If we let Phragmites go unchecked, it becomes very thick and very thatchy, and then you start to lose some of these lovely herbs that are commonly found in alkaline fens. So the other reason Turmennan is unfavourable is because it's got too many nutrients. So this is the indicator species they look at when they do that monitoring, and there's too much of it throughout the fen. Where might those nutrients be coming from? Well, we're not really sure. They could be coming in from the water, they could be coming in from runoff from adjacent fields, or they could be coming in from the air. And as part of this project, we have 6 of these posts throughout the fen. And these little vials in here have almost like a little blotting paper, filter paper inside of them, and they get swapped out every month, and we send them off to the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology in Edinburgh, and they analyse the ammonia levels. Ammonia is a particular problem in Northern Ireland, and it's a very worrying form of atmospheric pollution, and is particularly bad for our peatlands and wetlands, which are very vulnerable to this type of deposition. There's a clue in the picture here as to why we think maybe levels are higher in some areas than other. This is the right flank of the fen, and as you can see, this is farmed very close to the edge. So hopefully we can resolve something with the landholder and have that practice changed. So one of the other challenges we had was getting rid of some rhododendron in the fen. So it got a hold down in this southeastern flank, and was very well established, lots and lots of plants, and lots of very mature plants, and anybody who knows this plant knows it's a real thug. Each flower can produce thousands of seeds, so a real I'm happy to say that we got rid of it this year. Took 12 person days to get rid of it. And it poses this sort of illustrates one of the challenges we have with these sites, which is getting in and out of them. Sometimes they are fenced with a barbed wire fence, and you lose a lot of waterproof trousers that way. We're happy to say this owner was particularly easy to work with and actually built us a style, so that made life a lot easier getting that rhododendron in and out of that site. Some of the larger pieces of wood went off site to be burnt in a kiln, and we've made charcoal from that, and the rest of it was chipped and just taken away for composting. Rhododendron is toxic to stock. The fen is unfenced on one side here, so the stock could have got in and had access to those chippings, so we wanted to make sure they were off site. So one of the other reasons why we wanted to get rid of the rhododendron was because it was growing predominantly where the marsh fritillary was turning up, and this is one of Europe's most endangered insect species, the only one protected under the EU Habitats Directive, and it is breeding on Turmennan. We wouldn't consider Turmennan to be a hotspot for the species. It only has a couple of webs, but with proper management we could get levels of the food plant for the caterpillar up at much higher levels, and then it could be a very important stepping stone across the landscape for this species. So because of the marsh fritillary and because of the designation for invertebrates, we commissioned some extra help from Alan and Mellon Environmental, and they came in to look at the site. And again, this illustrates another interesting access point, because the western flank was very hard to reach. You couldn't reach it from the north because it had become very overgrown. So we knocked on a few doors, and we found a landholder was more than happy to let us come in. And he said, that's fine, but you can't go through that plantation because that's also owned by somebody else, but I'm sure he'll be fine. He indeed was fine. And we now work very closely with him, and he knows when we're coming in and out. This is the ash plantation that I mentioned earlier, and it's really quite a beautiful spot. Has campion flowering almost all year round in it. And lo and behold, Alan and Mellon found a species new to Ireland, which was this lovely little slater or woodlouse. And Dr. Anderson, who found that, also made the second discovery in Northern Ireland for the swamp orb mussel. And here's Roy out looking in the fen. So another first for the site and for Ireland was the discovery of the bleeding tooth fungus. This is commonly found in Caledonian forests, I think, in Scotland. The purple pigmentation is used for dyeing wool for kilts. So that was a nice discovery. But amongst all these discoveries and amongst all the writing of the Conservation Action Plan, we needed to really understand what was going on with the water at this site. There was a very good suspicion that it was groundwater fed, but we didn't know for absolutely sure. So we contracted in some hydrologists to look at the water regime to answer those questions for us. So we flew LiDAR data for all, we acquired LiDAR for all of our sites, all of the bogs and all of the fens. And for Turmennan, we flew what we thought was the catchment, so this large black area. So we were looking to capture all the information within the catchment for that site. And turned out that we probably didn't fly a big enough area, because RPS have now decided that yes, it is definitely a groundwater fed system, but they can't fully explain where the water is coming from. They've measured how the water's coming in through just simple rain gauges, and they've measured what's coming out through flow gauging on the stream, but the numbers don't quite add up. So what they suspect is that there is very complicated geology, and this is a picture of the sort of geological map that's been done for the area, and that there's probably a fault line underneath Turmennan, and that's adding water to the fen. Some good news to end off with, which is that pollution levels that they were picking up in the groundwater are very low, so that's very positive. So just to conclude, as you can see, it's a complex site. We've got lots of different owners, we've got lots of different challenges, we've got complex hydrology that we still don't fully understand, but I think the future is very positive for this site, and I think we have a very good chance of getting it back into good conservation condition status. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
once again. Thanks very much, Trish, for that fantastic presentation. If I could just encourage everyone to submit questions, please, to the question and answer function. And we have a bit of a discussion going on in the chat function, which is great to see. But if you have any specific questions that you would like answered, please do avail of that function. I'm just going to pick up on a wee thing sitting in the chat function. You know, it's great to see the work that National Trust are doing and their sort of their intent to move forward. So perhaps Melina and Patrick, you'd like to expand on that a bit more.
Thanks, Eamon. Thanks for inviting us along to be able to present the work of the Mourns. So yes, the Trust have set a target to be net zero carbon by 2030. So that was meant we're taking a real look at what carbon potential we have, carbon storage potential we have across our lands. So we've got a big tree planting ambition, but we're also keen to look at where we can maximise restoration of priority habitats. So within Northern Ireland, we've got a big swathe of blanket bog on Divis and a raised bog within the Argery and mosses. So we're currently looking at developing management plans for those sites, and we're very keen to get a handle on what condition they're in so we can improve that condition. And we've done our mapping process, so we're at that stage where we're trying to then implement these plans. I'll pass to Patrick to give you the specifics on project moving forward within Donard.
Yes, I suppose in terms of the project in Donard, we've covered around, well, we hope to cover around 2.5 kilometres by the end of this project. And that's the main path up the Glen River. So that's the main route to follow, but there's lots of other paths that users take. And we're keen to get a conditions survey done to understand users, where they're going, and potentially looking at how we can create or restore other paths that are within the Mourns themselves. And we also have a larger, more complex area, which is called the Saddle, which has suffered particularly from erosion. And we'll be looking at potentially bringing plant up to do that larger scale work, working with our stakeholders, and trying just to get a more kind of strategic path in place, because there's quite a lot of different ownerships within the Mourns, and we'd be keen to work with other landowners to come up with a strategic path plan.
That's great, folks. I suppose just building on that, how have you found the recent pandemic, you know, balancing providing access and also continuing to do this really important restoration work? How do you feel that the pandemic potentially has impacted on its delivery this year?
From my point of view, from our point of view, I think it's pushed us back a little bit. You know, we had planned to move the stone back in March. That was delayed, so we were having a helicopter come from Scotland to move stone from one of our quarries to the main path. So that was pushed back quite a few months. We had some staff furloughed, which was a challenge. So half the Mourne team were furloughed. And the other half, I suppose, there was a lot of people pressure. We found, especially at the end of lockdown, there's a lot of people coming out, people who weren't quite understanding the countryside code. So lots of litter, vandalism, fires. So a lot of our time and resources were spent kind of managing that.
Okay, that's great. Trish, I'm going to move to yourself. We've got a number of questions regarding, I suppose, land use management in the surrounding Turmennan area, and maybe picking up on the importance of working with the local community. So there's a few questions with regards to ammonia and sort of say turf cutting on the site. So could you maybe expand a little bit more, you know, on the importance of working with the local community and advising on perhaps the best land use management practices in the surrounding area?
Yeah, sure. So the investigations we do on sort of pollution levels will let us pinpoint exactly where there's any specific problems, and some of those are really, you know, really specific to like one landowner. So that'll let us identify that and hopefully work with them. I guess the struggle with this kind of project is that when you're doing, when you're working to the boundary of the SAC, it's not really practical from the site's point of view. You really want to be working at the catchment scale. And one of the ways that we've done that is we expanded out. We had a public talk via Zoom with the people who lived in the local area. And there was a real outpouring of interest. And I think it is fair to say that people who live in that area are fascinated by that wetland and the fact that it's so significant in an international scale. So I think I'm reading from that there is a willingness for people to understand how what they do in that catchment affects that particular wetland. So we would hope to see, we'd always hope to work with landowners. So we don't have a regulatory function at all in Ulster Wildlife. We're just solely about selling the positive. And this project, the Interreg project, has allowed us to do things like offer full price fencing and that kind of thing. So it's very much a carrot approach. But the regulatory approach is just as important. And further down the line, we may have to see some kind of changes to ammonia practices in the area, specifically because there are parts of the fen that are being very negatively affected by ammonia deposition. So I don't know if that answers fully what the question was, but
I suppose just keeping with the ammonia deposition,
yeah.
We have a significant problem here in Northern Ireland, and I suppose we have a question in to see if it is known that any other areas of peatland in the UK have suffered as much from ammonia deposition as those in Northern Ireland have, or is it the same case across the water as it is for ourselves here, perhaps, piece of work.
It's not, unfortunately. Ammonia is a significant problem for Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK. Our levels are dramatically worse than anywhere else. And that's largely because we are predominantly an agricultural society still. So we are producing a vast amount of emissions from the farming industry. And I guess the good news about that is we know where they're coming from. So, and there are solutions there. So it'll just be about, I guess, farmers stepping up and putting those solutions into practice, and us helping them deliver those output-based results. So maybe, instead of a farmer slurrying a field beside a wetland, maybe he could be paid instead to step back from that wetland and manage it for its values rather than putting slurry on it. So the ammonia challenge is a significant one for Northern Ireland, and a very significant one for our peatlands and wetlands.
Okay, and this is for all of us, I suppose. Is what unique challenges do you think Northern Ireland faces? Building on the challenges that we have, for example, ammonia in its peatland restoration journey.
Well, I'll sort of maybe jump in there. Probably one of our biggest challenges would be to drive down greenhouse gas emissions. And I see there was a very ambitious target announced this morning, and we're supposed to be reducing them by about 78%. And peatland restoration is the lowest hanging fruit for that. So blanket bog restoration, active bog restoration, we have plenty of them in Northern Ireland. We have some of the best sites, I think, in the UK. And this ammonia deposition is a relatively new kind of kid on the block. So if we can get a handle on that, then we've got some really good sites that we could then restore. They could be locking up carbon, providing great habitat for all our species, providing people on the land with an income stream. And that's really important, that the community is brought along in this, and it's not just us telling them what to do, but that they can get something out of it.
Melina, Patrick, would you like to jump in there?
Maybe add to the fact, we're keen to provide access for people. Sometimes there's a conflict in providing that access and the erosion that bringing people to sites can bring. So it's trying to find a strategic way to manage peatland, to restore sites, but also to give people the opportunity to visit those areas. Because we don't have the same access legislation as there is across the water. There's no access, there's no right to roam as such. So the sites which NGOs provide, along with local councils and government, are key sites to allow people to engage with nature. So it's making sure we do that in a very sustainable way.
Okay. And another question's came in is sort of linked to that potential challenge is financing. And it's a specific question for National Trust here. With the large area of peatland owned by the National Trust, which will be a large financial cost to restore them, do the National Trust lease out land to private developers to restore these assets using natural capital outcome finance?
At the minute, we're very focused to offset our own carbon emissions. So for now, we'll be claiming those credits to try and meet our targets by 2030. And so long term, there may are options to look beyond our own carbon capture.
Okay. And Trish, just sort of from my own interest as well, do you think there'll be any change to the management of the site if you've now to consider the Water Framework Directive?
Yes, the Water Framework Directive brings a whole load of different management recommendations. And again, this is where we could probably do in Northern Ireland with a bit of like landscape scale planning rather than one project delivering Water Framework Directive issues and another project delivering Habitat Directive issues. And we really need to be working together to look at all those holistic problems at a landscape scale. And no, Turmennan is just a little tiny example of how those issues sort of knit together and make it really important. Even with, we've had contact now from the area of natural beauty, which Turmennan lies within, to say they're running a woodland planting scheme. And, you know, again, it'd be lovely to see all those people sitting around the table planning together for and with the community in these areas.
Okay. Just a few more questions here, folks. We have one for National Trust. There used to be some amazing lowland heath and bog sites on the Mourne Plain south of the hills. Is there much of this left? And this person recalls it's lost at an amazing rate in the 1990s, pushed along by wall building by the ESA grants. It's a very specific question there, folks, but hopefully one you can answer or shed some light on.
I'm afraid I can't.
That's all right. That's okay. Where do you see your projects going in the future? We've got 2 minutes left here. What's sort of the next stages?
So for us, for our Interreg project, we're very hopeful that we'll be able to tap into Peace Plus funding, which is again European funding, and continue some work on these sites. The nightmare for anybody involved in a project is project end and then we walk away. That's not a good outcome. So we hope to be able to take on some new sites, but also keep those links going to those previous sites going on. We see a lot of great work in Scotland with lots of money involved, put out there by the Scottish government for peatland restoration. The Irish government has similarly announced a massive amount of money for peatland restoration. We're just waiting for Northern Ireland government to announce something similar.
And I know you touched briefly on earlier, Emelina, but if you've anything additional there.
Yeah, I think what Chris has said, it's all about trying to get more strategic funding streams. And at the minute, the 4 big NGOs are working on Nature Recovery Network. So Ulster Wildlife, RSPB would entrust in ourselves. So we're looking at trying to have a more strategic approach to conservation management at a landscape scale. So hopefully from that, we could tap into Peace Plus money as well. So more partnership working and again, engaging the local community and bringing people along with us. I think that's the key.
Okay, that's great, folks. Thank you very much for your time. And just a reminder, everyone, there's a breakout session over at 12:30 to 1 o'clock, a much more informal session if you'd like to come along and discuss with the panelists here and the panelists from earlier this morning. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.